Welcome, my darlings, to my midsummer party. I've brought so many friends to share tales with you. I hope you enjoy. Midsummer is, of course, a magical time. And not always so kind. Be sure to check out their channels and give them a like and let them know what you think. A Good Boy by Confra. Boris was a good dog. He was my best friend for 12 years. Through the good times and the bad. Always there for me. How sad it is that he died the week before we moved into a new house. That place felt so big and empty without my friend. On the very first night, I laid awake in bed, thinking about our good times together. That's when I heard something. It sounded like footsteps, but distant. Like I was out in a field and something huge was walking a mile away. A picture of me and Boris trembled on the wall. Then whispers, faint and hurried. Then a growl, one that I'd never forget. My friend's growl. He barked. I jumped up. All noises dimmed and stopped. The house went quiet again. Come the second night, I'd convinced myself the whole thing was imaginary. My bed was nice and warm when the picture trembled once more. Whispers, far away. A growl, a bark, but no silence yet. An agitation, more barks, more growls, loud whispers. He was becoming aggressive, agitated. This lasted a few minutes until the otherworldly noises dimmed. All I could hear afterwards was the dog, his nails tapping the floor outside my room. Holding my breath, I peeked out. Boris, except it wasn't him, not quite. It had been, but not anymore. Pieces of fur missing, fresh scars, red eyes, drooling and limp. He looked like a dog that went to hell and back. I closed the door. By morning he was gone, and I checked in at a nearby hotel. It was time to seek professional help. Her name was Melina, a psychic, and she claimed the situation was not at all as unusual as you might think. When the connection between an owner and a pet is too strong, it can become difficult to move on. She sold me a special herb and gave me clear instructions. Get something that belonged to him. His old leash will do. Make a wooden fire in the middle of your house. Burn it with the herbs. It should be enough. Dogs are the easiest to get rid of. You should feel lucky. I did as told. The fire, the leash, the herbs. As the flame died, there was a long, sorrowful howl. The smoke all went down at once and vanished. It had worked. Somehow I was sure of it. He was gone again, and this time I was glad. It was bedtime again when, once again, a noise. Damn it, could it have failed? Was he back again? The trembling on the picture, the whispers, louder now, louder than ever, coming close, just outside. I went to the door, hands shaking, and placed my ear near the keyhole. Everything was quiet for a long time. But finally, a single whisper returned. I could distinguish the words this time. The dog is gone. The path is clear. So quoth this raven.
So summer came, and with all the fun that comes with it, me and my friends decided to go camping. One fun part of camping, you might recall, is setting up the tents, or having a marshmallow barbecue. My favorite is the scary stories around the campfire. Me and my 3 friends sit in a circle around the fire and take turns telling scary stories. George was up first. He had nothing special, just some boring headless horseman story nobody cared about. Next up was Lily. She told a quite spooky story about some mistress of the forest, or whatever it was called. Sarah had a quite interesting story. As a matter of fact, she told us of how she survived an encounter with a serial rapist. No bravery or making herself look like a hero, just the real story and how she managed to evade it. Go on, John. Tell us your story. Me? Please, I already told you all I had. We've been dead since 40 years. You expect me to have something after all of them? But I lied. I did have a story. Our story.
I was never the type of person to always stay in the house when I was younger. I was always outside, playing with the other kids in the apartment complex, riding bikes, playing soccer. It was finally summertime, my favorite time of the year. My best friend Josh was coming home from school. Josh went to a school far away, so I wasn't able to see him often. I was excited. Josh was 15 years old, and I was 14 at the time. Before he went off to school, we did everything together, but his parents sent him off to live with his grandparents. He was almost here. I had it all planned out. My best friend and I had the whole summer to ourselves, just like we used to. He finally arrived, but something was different. It wasn't the Josh I knew. He just wasn't the same. I asked him if he was okay, but his family just looked at him, and Josh nervously said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I knew when he was lying. He wasn't the best liar. I had so many questions I wanted to ask him, but I couldn't. With his family around, I needed some alone time with him. His parents invited me over for lunch, and I agreed. They were cooking Sloppy Joe. It was Josh's favorite. After we ate, Josh and I went to go out to play. I looked at Josh and said it was great to see you again, but you seem different. Josh replied, "We can't talk here. Let's go somewhere else." He took me by an abandoned train tracks in the woods. I said, "Josh, where are we going?" He replied, "We are almost there." I said, "Okay, Josh, you have some explaining to do." 4 minutes later, we finally get to what looks like a big tree house. Josh, where are we?" I said. He looked at me and replied, "There's something I need to tell you." He goes on to say that he never moved in with his grandparents and went away to school. I was shocked. How could my best friend just lie to me? I was speechless. I told Josh, "How could you just lie to me? Why would your parents just lie like that?" What Josh told me next just broke my heart. He went on to say that his parents sent him away for testing. Then his phone started to ring. He said he had to go. I was left with so many more questions. They sent him away for testing? What does that even mean? Nothing was wrong with him. I was confused. More than ever, I needed more answers. He was my best friend. I knew him my whole life. I would have knew if something was wrong. The next day, I called Josh, but got no answer. I called a few more times, and still no answer. I decided to walk over to Josh's house to see if he was home. As I was knocking on the door, it creaked open. It was empty, literally empty. Everything was gone. Where could he have gone? Where was his family? And that was the last time that I ever saw Josh. Until now, 10 years later, I'm 24 years old. I have a wife and a beautiful baby boy. Josh is back. After all this time, I was left with not knowing what happened to him. But this time, Josh left without saying anything. Josh is 25 now, but he looks like he's in his 30s. He's standing at my front door. How did he find me? I live in a different town now. My wife is asking who is at the door, and I told her to come meet Josh, that Josh was my childhood best friend. She gave me a weird look and said that no one was there, and she walked away. I offered Josh a beer and asked him what happened. He said that his parents moved away. I said the last thing I heard from you was your parents sent you away for testing. You never explained what you meant by that. I'm sorry. You are right, Josh said. My wife walked back in and asked me who I was talking to. I replied, "Honey, don't you see that I'm talking to Josh? Please don't be rude." I looked over to Josh and he was gone. My wife said, "Did you take your medication? You keep talking about Josh again. You know Josh died when you were a kid."
People always tell you not to play with Ouija boards. Personally, I've never bought into any of that nonsense. I'm not afraid of something invented by a toy company. Every account you hear of weird stuff happening after someone used a Ouija board at a slumber party or whatever is just due to the power of suggestion. If you tell someone that something creepy is going to happen, they'll see something creepy in everything. I'm sorry, I just didn't buy it. I also didn't buy into these stupid ritual memes that keep popping up on the internet. There are these games, I guess you'd call them games, where you go through some ridiculous set of steps, a ritual, to either speak to the dead or predict your future or summon a demon or whatever. They always come with a warning along the lines of "do not try this." Then why post it on the internet, you morons? You want people to do this shit and then report on all the creepy stuff that happened and blah blah blah. Possibly the most famous one is Bloody Mary. It's the one where you stand in front of a mirror and repeat Bloody Mary 3 times. Then supposedly this ghost appears to scratch your eyes out. Why would I want to do that? Why does anyone do any of this bullshit? So, I decided to do a little trolling. I went on a forum that discussed topics of the supernatural and paranormal. Those places are full of superstitious smucks that will eat up anything even remotely disturbing. I posted the following. Hey everyone, have you heard of the Ragedoll ritual? A friend of mine, yeah, we'll call him John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmid, told me about it, and I wanted to see if anyone has actually tried it. I can't seem to find any accounts of it online anywhere. That's because I made it up. Apparently, what you do is take an old doll. Any doll will do, but they say it works best if you use one you made yourself. These things always want you to make stuff. This ritual also seems to work best when performed in the month of August, but you can really do it anytime, because why not? You take a lock from your own hair and wrap it around the neck of the doll. If your hair is too short, or you don't have any personal piece of yourself will do. A fingernail clipping, or even a drop of blood. I didn't really want to encourage bloodletting, but it sounded good. After attaching the personal item from yourself to the doll, wait until midnight. The ritual must begin exactly at the stroke of midnight, or else it will not work. Arbitrary rules, a must-have component. Exactly at midnight, hold the doll tightly in your hands and repeat the phrase, I invite you, Astaroth. I did a random search for demon names on Google. To inhabit this object 3 times. After the 3rd time, you will feel the doll move in your hands. This is the sign that the demon has accepted your invitation. They always have to accept it, don't they? If after the 3rd time you do not feel the doll move, repeat the process. If it still does not move, the demon has not accepted your invitation. You do not need to do anything further. The ritual is over. If you receive an acceptance, place the doll inside a closet or other small space that can be closed. It is very important that you do not open the door until the ritual is complete. You may hear knocking on the door or shambling inside the closet. Do not open the door. The demon is bound to the doll, but if you allow it to roam throughout your home, it may attach itself to something else and refuse to leave after the ritual is over, because creepy. You may now ask the doll any questions you like, but you only have until 1 a.m. Sometimes the doll would answer with a voice, sometimes through knocks on the door signaling yes or no. If you do not complete the ritual by 1 a.m., the demon may be locked inside the doll forever. Once you have completed your questions, repeat the phrase, Astaroth, I release you 3 times. Wait until you no longer hear any noise from inside the closet. Then it is safe to open the door. Afterward, bury the doll and mark the ground with the symbol of the cross. This will prevent the demon from ever returning. Sounds legit, right? Please follow the instructions exactly, as failure to do so can have disastrous results. After I posted the ritual, I kept a close eye on it. It took a few days, but the replies started coming in. Oh my god, you guys, I tried it and the doll really does move. Please, don't try this ritual. The demon still hasn't left and I've had nightmares every night since. Fake. Didn't work. This is stupid. I agreed, buddy, but of course I couldn't say that. I tried it and when I opened the closet, the doll was gone. What do I do? I had a few good laughs. The stories started to get more detailed and some were actually pretty good. I don't know if these people were just delusional, or if they were playing along by making things up to add legitimacy, but it was still fun. I read dozens of stories about the ritual going wrong, and a few about how it went perfectly and they had all of their questions answered. One person told of how the demon doll predicted his brother's death. It was fun, but soon it was growing stale, so I moved on to do other things. A few weeks went by without me checking the forum. One day, after coming home from work, I went through my usual routine. I pulled off my shoes and my jacket, and when I went to throw them in my closet, something stopped me. There on the floor was a little ragdoll. It looked to be handmade. Around its neck was wrapped a strand of hair. I would have been creeped out, but I had told a friend a while back about my little prank online, and I figured he left it there for me to find. I chuckled to myself and went on about my evening. I opened the refrigerator to grab a beer, another little doll, nestled among the leftovers. I took it out and placed it on the kitchen counter. I had to admire my friend's dedication to the prank, though I was starting to regret ever giving him a key to my house. But that was just the beginning. I started finding dolls everywhere. In the shower, in the kitchen cabinets, in my car, under the sofa, in the fireplace. Dolls of every shape and size, some handmade, some factory, some even had hair wrapped around them. Some had droplets of blood. It was then I decided to check the forum. I was astonished at what I found. There were hundreds of posts, all variations of the same thing. Someone had tried the ritual, but the doll had gone missing. I haven't slept in days. They won't let me. I keep throwing them away, but they always return. All night long, knocking, roaming, whispering. Please, I'm begging you, and this is no joke. Do not try the ragdoll ritual. I can't take any more of them. When the doll goes missing, it finds its way to me. I suppose it's a punishment for playing around with things I didn't understand, didn't even believe in, but please, if you have a heart, do not Try it.
According to myths of the time, during the Great War, both German and British soldiers experienced any number of phenomena that were officially suppressed by both governments. Rumors abounded of secret weapons and covert experiments, but one story was too strange for even embittered soldiers to attribute to conscienceless, wartime powermongers. It is said that shortly after the Battle of Flanders, surgeons and nurses began to notice errors in admittance logs. The books showed soldiers placed in cots that had obviously seen no use for days. It was as if the wounded were simply getting back up and walking out after being admitted. Within the week, hospitals all over France began to report actual disappearances. During the night, under the noses of the staff, soldiers and all their personal effects were simply removed by some unknown unseen agent. Desertion was suspected, of course, but the gravity of some injuries made such an escape a laughable impossibility. Doctors swore aids to secrecy to stem the rising panic, but the night itself continued to swallow up the invalid sons of England at an ever-increasing pace. The patients were not oblivious to the missing soldiers, and their fear of the sickbed gradually outstripped their fear of the Germans. A whispered fear by a careless nurse was all it took to lead to a riot in one case. And after the commotion had been quelled, several instances of suicide. The patients began to describe dreams and nightmares of glassy-eyed, staring things that crept in the doctor's shadows and caressed the dying with hundreds of long, thin, grasping fingers. Delusions and hysteria could no longer be suppressed, and the hospitals were forced to close, sending the sick and injured back to England under any number of pretenses. The disappearances ended almost immediately, and the senior officers sealed all reports, citing hallucinogenic effects of German gas attacks. Still, what was perhaps least explainable was the top-secret German records, recovered after the war's conclusion, describing an almost identical menace. But when the French hospitals closed, German losses nearly doubled overnight. Indeed, the malefactor followed the German retreat all the way to the capital, where hospitalization became as good as a death sentence. As the Entente powers closed the distance to Berlin, fevered rants of doctors and nurses grew to match that of their patients. Horrible visions of huge black eyes and thin, needle-like teeth filled memos that went unread by the collapsing government. Just before Berlin fell, however, the reports and frantic pleas for military intervention ceased. Doctors and staff went back to their duties. Tales of ghoulish stalkers dismissed as infectious delusions and war stress. The war ended and no formal investigation was ever mounted by either side. There have never been any true explanations for the phenomena, and all that we are left with are grim stories of hospitalized madness. Still, it is strange to think that an entire young generation of German doctors, sworn to do no harm, the same doctors who so suddenly renounced the stalking horror, should be so complacent in the bloodthirsty schemes of the Nazi Party decades later. Even stranger, that their zeal in the butchery more closely resembled hunger than hatred.
In the summer of 1985, my mother, sister, father, and myself moved into a rural farmhouse in central Kentucky. The house was not in the greatest of shape, but it did the job. Even though my father had served his country for 22 years, he never took the time to attend college or even a vocational course. So when he left the service, his options were few when it came to employment. He found a job fixing copying machines in a small city of Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and my mother found work at a clothing store. Needless to say, both my sister and I, who was 5 years older than me, were latchkey kids. Not out of the norm in the 80s. We were renting that house at the time, and our landlord was an old crotchety man. He did little to nothing to keep the house up, but given the low rent and the fact that we were just below the poverty line, it was acceptable. There was nothing extraordinary about this home. A basement, the middle floor, and the attic had been converted into a master bedroom. As any 11-year-old, the basement was not my favorite. Always dark, always spooky. The washer and dryer were there, along with a large freezer. It was segmented by partial center block walls, as if somebody wanted to do something with it, but never really got around to it. The house had no air conditioning, and the furnace worked some of the time. We couldn't afford anything more than fans in the summertime and space heaters in the winter. The house had been rented and left over and over again prior to us moving in, and after that first year, it became clear why. My experiences started on a Friday afternoon. Both my mother and father were working. My sister was at school. As for me, I was at home, trying to recover from the flu that no one else in my school seemed to have. At the time, I got sick. A lot. Many nights I would have chills and a fever, but by the next day, I would be alright. My mother took me to the doctor repeatedly, but they could never really pinpoint what the problem was. The windows were open, and the 2 box fans were going that hot July day. I was lying on the couch, watching one of our 3 channels that we could pick up with our Ruth-mounted Radio Shack antenna. As I lay watching some old show, static began to overtake the television screen. Not bad at first, but then basically made it impossible to watch whatever horrible show was on at the time. I raised up, irked that I had to move, as the static became unbearable, both visibly and to my ears. I made my way over to the large oak cabinet that contained the behemoth set. That was the day, the moment when I realized that this house would change me, and I would never be the same. I began messing with the wires in the back of the set, checking connections, and becoming worried that this snafu would prevent me from watching my afternoon cartoons. And in 1955, G.I. Joe was not just entertainment, but a way of life for me. The TV was a kid set. By that I mean it came in pieces, and my father literally put it together and installed it into the oak cabinet that took way too much floor space. As I proceeded with my examination, I moved to the front of the TV, pulling out the control panel, and tried to make any adjustment that might bring it back to life. I leaned over and turned the set off. I was now just staring at it, pondering my next move as I looked at the black, dark screen. All I could see was the reflection of the living room behind me. The light from the curtainless window made my surroundings in the tube all that much more clearer. Everything appeared normal to me at first, as my main focus was on my need to watch my upcoming cartoons. But right at that moment, I noticed something out of place in that reflection. A man was sitting on the very couch that I had just left. The fear shot through me like a bolt of electricity. I spun my head around as fast as humanly possible to see nothing. I stood up as fast as scanned the room. My heart was racing. How did somebody get in here without me hearing or seeing them? I cautiously made my way through the house, checking first my sister's room, then mine. I slowly walked through the kitchen as it was the gateway of the rest of the home, including that basement. I skipped that door, going instead to the one that led to my parents' room. I quietly moved up the stairs, trying to take in as much as I could. Still, I found nothing, and no evidence that anyone was there. I finally made my way back to the kitchen and the basement door. I opened it with just enough space to flick on the light. Once they came on, I pushed the door open and peered down the stairs. That was enough for me. As I came back to the living room, I looked around and saw no more than the couch, chairs, and that overgrown TV. Sitting back on the couch, I started, to the best of my 11-year-old brain could reason, to think about what exactly I had just seen. He looked to be in his late 40s, in a black suit, black hair, long face, and he was not looking at me, just looking forward with a blank stare. I tried to compose and reason with myself. I was a giant horror geek, and I had just watched Poltergeist for the 50th time this past weekend. It was a trick of light and shadow, in my imagination, I figured. It did not make sense that anyone could come into the house, for one, but also, why would they sit down, get up, and leave? A ghost was out of the question, as nothing had happened in a few months that we have lived here, and besides, that was fiction. My final thought was, I am simply not seeing what I thought I saw. Once I had come to that conclusion, I was able to steady myself and refocus my attention to what really mattered. My cartoons! I walked over and pushed the power button back on. Lo and behold, we have picture and sound. Just then the phone rang. I hate to admit it, but I jumped just a little. It was my sister, telling me that she was going to a friend's house after school and to let Mom know. I said, okay, and hung up the phone, not willing or wanting to know if my sister had anything else to say. I leaned back on the couch, feeling that I just accomplished something great by returning to my programs. I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was my bedroom door, and it was slowly opening. Was it the wind? Did I check that room for the non-existent intruder? I get up, make my way over, only to jump back when the door suddenly jutted open as if someone on the other side had grabbed the handle and decided to make a quick and forceful entrance into the living room. I took 2 or 3 quick steps back. I could see directly into my bedroom. Once again, nothing. The calmness that I had obtained from the prior investigation had suddenly vanished. My heart rate went up, and although I knew I was sick, my sinuses had become fairly clear from the rush of adrenaline. Hello? I half-heartedly spotted. No noise. Nothing came from anywhere. Of course it didn't. Nothing was there. Stepping further back, I was amazed at myself and the level of fear that had taken control of me. I took a deep breath, attempting to readjust my brain to find a rational explanation of the non-robber/ghost into a door that, up to a few seconds prior, had never done that before. I decided that stepping outside was a good idea. I spent about 10 minutes playing with my dog and just looking around. Inside of the living room, I could see through the screen door, but I decided that I would take one good look around. Laughing at myself, it dawned on me that there couldn't be anyone in that house, because my dog would have barked. She barked at everything from cars to a leaf that might have moved past her in an odd way. She was alert to the point of being irritating. After walking around the outside of the place and coming to my senses, I made my way back in. I went directly to the kitchen, grabbed a Coke and a small bag of chips, and sat myself down back in front of the idiot box. Then came the moment where I could no longer explain anything. Above me, from my parents' room, I heard distinct footsteps. Loud footsteps, moving from one end of the room to the other. Back and forth they went. I stared at the ceiling, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. Instead, they moved closer to the stairs. I moved to the doorway of the kitchen and listened as they proceeded to stomp down the steps. I was frozen, waiting and watching, and then nothing. Screaming as the attic door flew open was my next plan of attack. Not a great way of defending oneself, mind you, but that was the best I could come up with at that moment. I began to ponder whether or not I should call my mom at her workplace. However, I can imagine what would take place if I told her to please drive 20 miles back to the house because her son had basically lost his mind. Also, if she had, she would have told my dad, and that for me was a non-starter. He was not one who liked to be bothered with. Well, just about anything. So my options were shrinking as my level of fear was rising. Moving quickly back into the living room, but with my eyes still focused on the attic door. I did not know what to do. Making my way back to the couch, but this time, paying no mind to whatever was playing on the TV. I asked out loud, "Who are you?" When I received no response, I realized that I was basically whispering. I tried again, this time with more force in my voice. "Who are you?" When I got nothing back, the thought that my 11-year-old mind had come up with was simple. I was crazy and there was no stopping it. Staring at the screen door directly in front of me, I began to wonder if this was real. Perhaps I'm not going crazy. Perhaps there's something here. And if that's the case, I don't want to be around. I grabbed the phone and called my best friend. He had gotten home, having completed his day at school. It was a Friday, and I told him that I was feeling better and I should stay the night at his house. Hell, the entire weekend sounded pretty good. He asked his mom and said yes. Then he told me that he and his dad would pick me up in about an hour. Unfortunately, that hour would be too long for a wait. I went to my room, packed some things, grabbed some Nintendo games, and wrote my mom a note telling her that I was at my friend Jimmy's house for the weekend. The explanation sounded pretty mature for the time. I even told her to have a good weekend and to contact me if she needed anything. There was no doubt in my mind that I was not waiting around for another 2 hours before she got home, not to mention the 30 minutes it took for her to drive home. No thanks. Rocking myself back and forth, looking for my friend's father's car to pull up our overly long driveway. I was growing more and more anxious, but I knew my trauma, real or imagined, was coming to an end. Sitting there, with even the TV on, I noticed that everything had become eerily quiet. Fan boxes were on full blast, and the commercial on TV was very loud, but nothing seemed right. The air felt still. Everything outside of the main noise of the electrical equipment was oddly quiet. It was almost bizarre. I turned both fans on, and then the television. Suddenly, I was overcome with all the hairs on my body rising as if a low electrical current was going through me. Then it happened. I heard one thing. The one thing that I absolutely, positively did not want to hear. My name. Jonathan. It was a slow whisper, but loud enough to clearly make out whatever it was saying. My breathing became so heavy, and my heart was beating so fast that it was almost impossible for me to hear anything other than those two things, and yet, there it was again. Jonathan. Louder than before. I was in shock. I grabbed my belongings I was planning on taking with me, and I ran. I ran all the way down the driveway, leaving the doors wide open. I stayed there for 35 minutes before my friend showed up with his dad. When they got there, I requested that they go down the driveway so I might check the doors to make sure I locked them. His father did so without one complaint. After that weekend passed, and I returned home after school on the following Monday, instead of having a peaceful existence, whatever that thing was, it systematically began to haunt every member of my immediate family. My mother kept having things move around or go missing. My sister would hear whispers in her pillow and begin to spend more and more time with her friends, basically moving in with one of her friends. And my father, well, he would often see someone out of the corner of his eye. He would say he saw someone in the property, and one night, in the basement, while he was working on something. That incident was the start of our move away from that house in Kentucky, although he would never specifically say what happened. When it did, he began to plan our move. As for me, it called to me. I had horrible and disturbing nightmares, always taking place in that basement, and shadows would appear on the wall from time to time. Many years had passed since we lived there. The house was remodeled from what I understand, and many people have came and went. No matter where I have lived, I will never forget what happened there, and that incident is why I became a paranormal researcher. Even after all this time, when it's a hot summer day and I am alone, I often put earbuds in and listen to music if, for no other reason, to make sure I never hear my name being called from the shadows again.
9th of August, 1901. Dear Public, I would like to inform a lot of you of my recent activities. I am led to believe that the people of today are addicted to real-life theatrics and to any and all sorts of drama, and therefore, I find it suitable to share with you a fraction of my own dramatic lifestyle. About 2 a.m. this morning, I was standing in an alleyway, waiting. I was waiting for someone to cross paths with me. It did not matter to me who it would turn out to be. I'm not exactly a fastidious person when it comes to my tastes. I have but one condition. Whomever it may be that crossed my path, that they had to be alone. Acquaintance is far easier when there are no third parties. The moment I heard footsteps close by, I listened carefully. It was a lone person. Since it was a lone person, they fit my tastes, and I began tapping my cane on the concrete floor beneath our feet. After a few moments of aimless tapping, the person was close enough to notice my slightly crouched figure. Perhaps due to empathy or simply a matter of curiosity, said person approached me. In turn, I asked whom they are, setting up my act of a blind, middle-aged man. I must be a convincing actor if the man in front of me fell for my act rather quickly. I suppose it's a result of a wrongful notion that states if a man suffers from disability, he is weak or incapable of experiencing a normal eventful life. That is, however, not true, as Ludwig van Beethoven was able to produce music, even after losing his hearing. I find the notion of empathy to be a troubling one. It most notably clouds the human judgment. I, myself, was blessed to not be able to feel any empathy. Because of non-functioning amygdalae, my condition also leads me to feel neither fear nor aggression, and during my youth, it also hindered my ability to interact with other persons. However, with time, I learned how to fake emotion in order to overcome my social struggles. According to medicine, I am one of a kind. There is no name to what I have, and there is no name to what I am. Back to my meeting with a man in the alleyway. I suggested he lead my way back home, and he accepted my arrangement out of the kindness of his heart, something he made vocally clear. As the man was leading the way while I softly directed him, we walked for some 15 minutes, until we reached a place where the streetlights would not reveal my deeds to the world. I tapped the man on the shoulder, and when he turned around, I blew a handful of my magic powder into his face. This is the way I had captured all of my previous victims as well. The man stumbled backwards, cursing out at me while I informed him that the substance I had blown in his face was a strong hallucinogenic agent. Mind you, this substance I had created myself, and you will not be able to find it anywhere but in my possession. The man regained his balance and tried to take a swing at me. I dodged it with my cane, and began walking away from him, while he decided, foolishly, that he should follow me in order to exact revenge for my actions. After a few short minutes, the man became hysterical, and the man began screaming in my direction that I am a devil in a hat, and that he will exorcise me from this world in the name of the Lord. I had observed similar rumblings from past victims as well. I turned around, who was clearly trembling at the appearance the hallucinogenic agent gave me in his mind. Once I was close to the man, who fell to his knees while pleading for mercy, I pulled the blade hidden in my cane and stabbed him not too deeply in the abdomen to make sure he is conscious while I transport him to a more secluded location. Once the transportation was complete, I tied the man down to a chair and administered high amounts of drugs to reduce his ability to think soundly, as well as reduce his sensory reactions to pain. I gently sawed off his cranium while he was still out cold. Once he did wake up, I informed him that he is at a dinner table, and that dinner would be served immediately. He seemed genuinely delighted to find out he was being served food. Little did the fool know was the fact that the meat so pleasurably consumed was his own brain. Surprisingly, he survived through the loss of the majority of his cranial contents. After consuming most of his own brain, the man simply fell down on the plate before him and stopped showing signs of life. I hacked his head off and proceeded to skin the rest of the body. Skin, unlike the human brain, is a harmless organ for consummation, and I am most definitely going to use it in future meals. Tonight, I only ate his thigh, liver, and a lung. The rest of the body should sustain me for a week or so. Meat is meat, whenever you disregard your emotions towards its source. I do not see the difference between beef, pork, and human meat. You are what you eat, and you know this is the case. There is one difference, to be frank. It is in the quality. For me, human meat is a delicacy. Now I'm writing this down because I know you lot would enjoy reading this. Somewhere, deep inside, you are all like me, but you have empathy and a conscience to stop you from doing what I do. Right now, I may seem to whoever might read this as a common psychopath or sociopath, but that would be an understatement because, unlike that kind of person, I do not make mistakes. Even with this piece of information, is not going to help anyone find me, or let alone stop me from doing what I do. Otherwise, I would not be writing this letter, would I? Best regards. A man with finer tastes in life.
My darlings, I hope you've enjoyed this little midsummer party. Please check out my guests and subscribe to them. Give them a like. Let them know what you think. And as always, thank you for coming. And thank you to my Patreon supporters, Ermin Case, Darren and Jennifer, and Laura. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.